Welcome to the Finance Geeks, a podcast about real financial planning. If you're into numbers, strategies, and building a great planning business, this is your ultimate geeky hangout.
Hello and welcome to Season 3, Episode 6 of the Finance Geeks podcast. Thanks for joining us. My name is Warren Shute and I'm joined by
Paul Cleworth.
And today we're discussing, are clients sitting on too much cash? But before we dive into that, Paul, you've got a new background. What are you up to?
Yes, that's right. I'm still sorting this out. This new building that I've had built in the garden, the stables. It's sort of a client filming studio, podcast studio. Client events, that sort of thing. And I've getting there. I'm still trying to sort out this speaker. I've got my camera up here instead of down here, but I'm getting there. It allows me to sort of spend some time away from the main office where the staff are and get a bit of peace and quiet so I can think and do some Teams meetings in peace, which is great because before I've got a very loud voice, so I'm there and all the staff can hear me and hear all my conversations. But it's good.
Okay, that's cool. You pleased where it's going?
So it is because my favorite thing in here is a new sound system, and I've got a chap to help me set it up. It's a big TV and the speakers and stuff. And I finally bought a turntable, so I've been investing in some vinyl, which I have no idea why. I just thought I love the idea of taking it out, putting it on, choosing it, and listening to it. And that's great. But it's great. It's fun, and I've got about 20 or 25 12-inch LPs. But what's actually easier, quicker and better sound is streaming the music to the amp, which I can do. It's much easier than anything else because you can do it from your phone. And
it's a different sound. No, it's a different. The crackly sound I like. I've got to listen to the classic album. Yeah, it's authentic. I quite like it. Sitting down, just relaxing. I might get a book or just sit in my lounge and put my vinyl on.
Yeah. I get that. And albums are meant to be listened to, in terms of throughout, as opposed to knocking up a playlist on Spotify. And the artists put them together in that order, and you're supposed to go through them. But with a vinyl record, you listen to about 4 or 5 songs, then you got to turn it over.
I like it.
Yeah.
It works for me. So it's half term last week. So last week I was off out and about. I went off with my mum. So I took mum up to see her family and friends, and a bit of time in London with Bella. And making sure I walk my talk, and as I preach to my clients, had a PSA test. So
did you?
Yeah. So yeah.
Oh, very smart.
Yeah.
How often are you doing them then?
About every couple of years, because it's pretty low. My reading's pretty low, thankfully. When we was in London, we were supposed to have a full body scan, a full health scan, but that was when Microsoft had the outage. And it affected the scanning machine, so we couldn't get one of these full body scans.
Full body scan, inside and out.
Yeah. So I'm quite intrigued by these things. Hey, look, do you know what I try and say to my clients? We can sort their finances, but the main thing that's going to derail anything is your health.
Yeah,
so,
completely.
Finances is a logical system and process that you work with a good financial planner. You're going to get there. It's time in the seat. But same as your health deterioration, so you've got to stay on top of your health. So yeah, we invest a lot of time in our health and making sure things are on track and making sure things like that. Did you have a nice half term?
So it did, yeah. One of my boys was off for 2 weeks, one was off for a week. But last week we went for 4 days to Spain, to France, to Nice. Flew to Nice and decided to go from Heathrow instead of Luton. Anyway, we had a 1 day or 1.5 days of sun and then rain after that. But the best day was the Tuesday. We went to Monaco. It was amazing. We went to walk the F1 circuit. Went outside the casino. Had lunch. Went to the beach and went to the harbour and looked at all the yachts. All the very wealthy people's yachts. Where are all the customers' yachts? And we went to this town afterwards in a taxi called Eze, which is up the mountains about 25 minutes away. But it was the best part of the holiday. The views were amazing. There's an exotic garden at the top. You get to walk through this little town. And then we actually trekked for about an hour and a bit all the way down to the railway station. It was brilliant. So go to Eze, E-Z-E.
Okay. I'll go and have a look at Eze. So, okay, should we move on to the main body of our session today? Yeah. Are clients sitting on too much cash? Which is, I guess, a real appropriate time to have this discussion because the market seemed to be like at an all-time high. So how do you approach this, Paul? What's your thoughts?
Well, the At the moment, it's suggested by Rachel Reeves, by the statistics and so forth, that there's a lot of people in the UK sitting on a lot of cash. It's in the billions, hundreds of billions, and I think I sent you the figure. I'm trying to look it up now. Whether it's about 610 billion or something. It's massive, massive figure. And because interest rates have risen over the last 3 or 4 years, and they got to 5.25, back down to 4% now. But because it feels good getting a rate of return of 4 or 4.5%, and I think people are concerned perhaps about what's going on in stock markets. Maybe they don't understand investing, but a lot of people have sort of associate an ISA with cash. And so I've got definitely met clients that have got 100 grand in cash ISAs, filled it every year. That's great. But they've lost out because they've not been investing that money in something other than cash, equities and bonds and so forth, to get the return. It's maybe it's a British thing. I don't know. It's a security thing. It's a safety thing. But there's no question to me, holding too much cash is bad for your financial health
Would
in the
you
long
kind of
term.
would you kind of class cash as money market funds as well? I guess
Yeah,
because
those as
yeah,
well.
yeah. So
Um,
so how so what do we want? How much do we want our clients to hold in cash? I guess that's a good. I think we've got a different approach on this, haven't we? I think you have like a
yeah, I suspect so. We have a document which I'm happy to put a link to in the show notes, and just and put it on Dropbox or something, where we compare in our main tandem, our main Trails investment brochure, in cash monies, savings, what that means, what saving is, investing, speculating, and gambling. And we sort of say saving means cash. It means 0 to 5 years. It means access to monies, spending. It means liquidity. And in terms of how much someone should hold in cash, it is obviously a bit different depending on your circumstances. But if you've got a capital requirement, a requirement for capital in the short term. Short term is 0 to 5 years. You could hold it in cash to not jeopardize the value of that money. But anything longer than 5 years, and you just think, well, why am I holding it? Is it because I don't like volatility? Is it because I don't want to get a return on the money? If you ask someone, what do you want to do with this money, and they don't know, if a lot of the time it's the fact that they don't have options. A lot of people out there have cash because they don't trust the markets, they don't
yeah.
understand investing, they don't know what to do with it, and holding too much cash can mean you're losing out, and you're not making use of all of the potential return that's out there. So certainly those that have got debts to pay off, you might retain some in cash to overpay the debt, a mortgage, a loan, or whatever. But anything more than 5%, anything more than an emergency pot and known capital expenses, you think, look, fill your ISA, fill your pension, get it invested. Investing means equities. It means 7 to 10 years. And as long as you're going to live long enough to see that return, you
Yeah.
need the growth. You need that growth to support yourself.
Yeah, I think for our side of things, what we tend to say is very similar to what you've said. There is any capital expenditure you're likely to have in the next 5 years, you want to retain in cash. Like you said, just
Yeah.
not worth taking the risk with the money. Having 6 months of your expenditure held in an emergency reserve, so that would be in addition to that money. So you got that just tucked away in cash. And then if a client is relying on their investment portfolio to provide them with an income, okay,
Yeah.
then we typically want about 18 months of their income requirements in cash, and then a further 3.5 years in short-term fixed income, something
So
like
do you
that.
do the bucketing effect? Is that what you do? Do you like that expression?
No,
This idea of saying bucket 1, 0 to 5 years, bucket 2, 5 to 10 years, could be balanced, could be bonds. Anything longer than 10 years, bucket 3, which is all equities. Do you like that approach?
not really, if I'm honest. No, I wouldn't say so. We don't do it. So we have what we call liquidity, longevity, and legacy. So we have liquidity, which is basically 0 to 5 years, cash and fixed income, and then longevity, which is 100% equity. And then legacy, most certainly, is just a separate portfolio and also 100% equity. Most clients will fit into that mold. Not all clients, because some clients don't want to accept 100% equity with their balance their money. And for some clients, it's a huge sum of money. And therefore, we might dilute that down with a bit of short-term fixed income. But most of our clients will fit into that sort of mold. I think, and we separate it out on the platform so the clients can see their liquidity pot. They can say, okay, well, look, my income is being paid from this account here, this segment of the account, I can see I've got 5 years of my income there. When the markets go and do their silly things, they're less concerned because you just focus on what's right in front of you.
5 years worth of ink,
Yeah.
5 years in cash and bonds. So
Yeah,
so
so
you
it's
split the ISA and split the pension and do it that way.
yeah, kind of. Most of this comes from pensions or just a general account. A lot of the time, we don't touch the ISA. So if there's an ISA, we tend to put that. So we'll try and segment the accounts too. So we'd probably use the ISA for the longevity. Pensions typically depends on the size of the client, but pensions traditionally until now, I guess, have been longevity, and then we're spending the GIA money. So we'll split the GIA. We could split an ISA as well. There's a larger ISA portfolio.
Just take the GIA money first, regardless of CGT.
There isn't CGT because it's cash and fixed income. It's in cash and fixed income already. Does that make sense? So if it's new money coming on the portfolio, so client comes to us £1 million, for example, that's how we would segment the money out. So there'd be no CGT implications of doing it.
Right.
And then we would ideally only have a year in cash, but we're very mindful that clients don't rock up on their annual planning meeting 12 months later. Diaries conflict, things happen, holidays. So we want a bit of a buffer there. So we don't want to have to make a sale. And I think I've mentioned this before, but all we simply do is in 12 months' time, when they've spent their cash down, if the markets have been positive, we'll sell the equities to replenish the cash. And if they haven't, we'll sell the fixed income to replenish the cash and just allow the equities to recover, a bit of time to recover there.
There's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, of course. And I'm not saying it's the best way. It's just a strategy, a structure that we've got. But, I've been an advisor since 1995, living through 2000, when the markets did take about 5 years to fully recover. It's nice to have this reassurance in the background there.
The title is clients sitting on too much cash, how to get them comfortable investing. So we're talking about strategies for withdrawal and allocations to cash and how much is enough. And it's part of the story for sure. I think that the interesting there, the way that you segment the different pots and what you call them. And I think as long as the client understands the logic, the strategy there for withdrawal, that's great. That can work.
Yeah.
I've seen lots of different scenarios. People just holding 5 years in cash, no bonds at all. And just saying, let's just draw down the cash. As you say, there's no CGT, there's a bit of income tax, and they're getting maybe 3.5% return on it, give or take, maybe it's 4%. The way that we like to do it is to say, let's work out how much cash you need for known capital expenses the next, 1, 2, 3 years, possibly 5, holidays, gifts to kids, whatever. Okay, good. Doing some work on the house. What about an emergency pot? Okay, put some money in there.
Do you define that emergency pot?
And not as such. I think that it's one of those things where it's like having, it's relative to the amount of the total assets the client has, but it's a subjective figure. So they might have 20,000 or 50,000. Very often, a lot of clients of mine will have 50 grand in premium bonds and say, that's my emergency pot. That's my, if I need a new boiler or a new car or an operation or something. And so it's the unknown almost. And then the known capital expenses, yes, keep those yourself for holidays, refurb costs. I like to then keep overall as a percentage, 10 to 15% of their invested assets in cash, not with us on the portfolio. That includes the cash they're holding, to the point where they've got 12, as you've mentioned, 12 to 18 months worth of cash to be able to draw down one way or another. And they can, if markets do correct or have a downturn, have a temporary decline, that they can then turn off or reduce the withdrawals that they're making from their ISA, GIL, pension, or whatever, their investments. So at any one time, our clients have usually got 6 months, sometimes up to 12 months of income, of monies in cash that's being paid to them. And they can dip into that's for their required expenses day to day or monthly. And if they want to go on holiday or whatever, I differentiate that between their typical requirements for income and say, okay, we're going to spend 10 grand a year on holidays, whatever, 50 grand. Let's separate that. I'm not going to pay you that income to go on holiday, dig into it yourself. And so it's just a strategy of saying you look after most of your cash, we'll look after the cash where you're drawing an income from, and we'll set the most appropriate tax efficient withdrawal strategy from the portfolio.
Oh, okay. So you'll sell equities and fixed
equities
income.
And bonds, and say, okay, you need $3 grand a month. That's what you need. Let's sell down £18,000 worth. It might all come from the GIA initially, for example. We might decide that's the best thing. If the clients have not got any taxable income, we might say, well, let's use your personal allowance and draw down from the taxable part of the pension, $1,047.50 a month. Test it. taxable but no tax to pay. And so they get multiple amounts that add up to the amount that they need per month in the most efficient way.
And that'll be sales from the equity portion and the fixed
Yeah,
income.
so it maintains the risk profile for the for the client. If you've got a system where you're only selling down cash and bonds and the equities are getting bigger and bigger and you're not touching them, that might work for sure if the equities are invested and grow really nicely. It also can mean that you're taking more risk as you're going on because you're changing your risk, your asset allocation as you age. And you've got to have an optimal year where you time it perfectly and markets have gone up and you say, let's replenish those cash and bonds.
I think this is really good for our listeners because it is almost like the complete opposite way of doing it, isn't it? If you think about it. So I sort of advocate saying, well, actually, what we really want to do is have as much money in equities as we can so the portfolio grows, and then holding cash and fixed income to provide your income needs. Whereas you're saying, well, okay, let's just asset allocate the money across whatever your portfolio risk is, and then just do a proportional sale down across both asset classes. But so that's cool. That's good. And the viewers can take their view and
because you can see the return that our clients are getting net of all inflows, outflows, tax, costs, charges, all of that over the period of a year, 2 years. You can see the internal rate of returns. And so for me, I know that it works because we're doing it. And we've got a lot of clients now, probably 25% of all clients in drawdown. Average age 57, 58, they're taking their money out. We encourage them. And because markets have been going up.
Love
because,
that.
I do, and it makes it more fun talking about spending the money. But listen, I've just found that statistic that I mentioned there, 614 billion, according to an FT article. UK households are sitting on hundreds of billions of excess cash beyond 6 months of expenses. Now, you got to look into this figure. People can read the whole article and the FT, but it's a lot of money in cash. And however much that equates to per person, I don't know. But I do know that I've met clients where they've got a lot of money in cash and they've not found the right advisor, they've not been comfortable with investing, and they've just grown the cash pot because that's what they've known. And you just get into the habit of doing that. And they go, well, we'll use various accounts. We'll have some with National Savings Investments, some with whoever.
New client this week, 1.8 million in cash.
Really?
I couldn't believe it.
Did he save that or inherit it, or was it a big bonus or what?
She sold a business. Yeah. Don't worry. She had, I think net worth was about 14 million or something. But 1.8 in cash.
It's relative, isn't it, to the size of your other portfolio, to your property, your total asset base. And there's definitely a point when you can have too much in cash. I mean, there's an argument at the moment. Are we in on the precipice of some correction in markets because of an AI bubble burst? I mean, it's all over the press, and I personally don't. Well, you can't win with this argument, can you? I think that it's going to happen. There's going to be a sort of a downturn in markets at some point. I think that's the get out of jail card. And when will that be? The answer is I don't know. I think that there's more volatility for the next 6 months to a year because America's still debating about their relationship with China and who's going to be the world's mega force and for next economy. But they are dependent on each other. America for consumption, China for providing all of the natural rare earths to provide, all the chips and the solar panels and whatever else.
You should be a politician.
Yeah, well,
that'd be a good answer
to all this boring stuff. So getting back to this point, right? Can we agree that the return, the expected return on equities and bonds, certainly equities, is higher than cash?
Yeah, sure.
So
the expected return on equity should be about 9% a year.
Yeah, I think that something like that, it depends on what equities and is it market cap? Is it just America? There's a lot of data to show that the US market over the last 10 or 20 years has outperformed virtually every other area, emerging markets, global equities or whatever. But generally, global market equity is about 9%. And that is important to have this figure in mind when you talk to clients with cash, and you can show them data and graphs to say, despite ups and downs and volatility and all the rest of it and all the calamity that's happened with world events, the return on global equities is about 9%. Probably have to take off costs off that, tax charges, advisor costs. So let's say you're going to get 7.5%, 8%, that sort of figure. I think that's totally fair and reasonable. An expected return on cash today, there are accounts giving you 4.5%, Chase, Revolut, a few others. But of course, you're paying tax on that. And if anything over £1,000 for basic rate, £500 additional rate or whatever, zero for additional rate. and you think, right, I've got a little bit of allowance, got to pay tax on that interest. And if inflation as it is 3.8% and your net return is about 2.5 to 3, in real terms, you're losing money. No question about it. You are losing money, even though it feels quite good getting 4% gross.
Yeah, so in the expected return on fixed income, probably inflation if you're using sort of short-term fixed income investments. So that's why you want to have as much money. What's the expression, in the greatest companies of the world as possible, and in our world is just hold the cash and fixed income for liquidity.
Tell me about fixed income in your world, right? So when we say fixed income, obviously we know what we're talking about: government bonds, corporate bonds, whatever. But do you just buy global bonds for your clients? What's the average duration? And do you have short dated? Do you separate the two based on their requirements for income or longer term growth? How do you do it? Which bonds are we talking about?
Okay, so normally just use high grade, short term, globally diversified bonds.
Less
And
than 5 years, then.
we typically use the Vanguard fund
Okay.
for that.
And what's the expected return on that, or what has been the return?
Well, it'll be just inflation. The expected return of a fixed income account is inflation. That's what you should expect, period.
So what's interesting is if the gross return, for example, was 4%, and it's inside a GIA, and the client's getting 3% net after costs and charges, or 2.5%, they'd be better off just leaving it in cash, because they don't want to take the risk of that bond with the change in the price that's happened over the last, for recent past, where we got a massive price drop in global bonds.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I would often get that as a question from a client. And if you look at how fixed income works, when interest rates interest rates reduce, so you're getting 4% now, but over time it go down to 3 or 2.
Price goes up,
we would expect the fixed income fund to appreciate to compensate for that.
Yeah, yield goes down, price goes up. I know it's inverse, but the point is that even over the long term, a short dated bond, the realistic return is 3 to 5%. You're just not going to get 10% return. If you go long dated, or you go junk bonds, high yield bonds, you can get theoretically double digit returns. And historically, in the 90s, you were getting that, and they were similar to equities. But I think there's an argument to have, let's say, 10 to 15% of all of your assets in cash, could be even 20, and the rest in equities. You can have a scenario that works for certain clients. And I've got clients that are in their late 50s, early 60s, investing with us, drawing an income out of their portfolio, withdrawals, not really an income, they're withdrawing monies, 100% equities, and it completely works, and they're getting the returns. And they've just got to suck up the volatility aspect of it. And as long as they can deal with that volatility, they don't need any global bonds, any short day bonds, any gilts, any corp bonds. They don't need any of that. It's purely there to diversify, aren't they? They're purely there to reduce volatility.
If you buy into the fact that fixed income is a slightly higher risk than cash, then fixed income should provide a higher expected return. I think in this example, what you're saying is the current interest rate is 4%. But we both know that historically that's not always been the case. And during the fixed income debate, most fixed income funds or fixed income investments that were affected were more medium or longer duration. And that's probably why we both don't include it in our portfolios, just using short dated.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that we're missing, I suppose, with this is that we're on we've had a really good run in markets. It might continue because of momentum, and bull markets tend to last longer than 3 or 4 years. They tend to last 7 years or whatever. And I think that if a client said, "What's the optimal portfolio?" There's no exact answer to that, but I can tell them that for our clients, the typical average portfolio of clients that are in drawdown, that are in the 60s, is 70-30 or 75-25, 75% equities on average, 25% bonds. That's the way it happens to work. If you include their cash into that, it pushes them more down, possibly below 70% of equities. And of course, when you include their property in that, they've got further diversification with that, even with their home.
Yeah, I wouldn't ever include their property, because that's like an unrealizable asset that you're not going to spend.
Sure.
Yeah, but I would agree with the 75. I'd agree with the 75-25.
Yeah.
Because if you think like a typical drawdown yield would be about 5% from a portfolio, 5 years of income requirement. Yeah, 5 years of income requirements at 5% would be 25%. So you've got 25% of the money in cash and fixed income. and then
Yeah,
75%
yeah,
in equity. So
yeah, and
it's different ways of getting probably a similar outcome. So if a client is in a decumulation, a drawdown, and we're holding, say, 5% a year for 5 years in short-term fixed income and cash, that is 25% of the portfolio, 75% equity. So
yeah,
it
yeah.
kind of works.
So historically, again, our listeners will probably know this, being mostly advisors, that for 100% equities, the data that we have shows that the worst calendar year of 100% equities in the last 20 years to the end of December 24 was minus 28% on the portfolios that we manage and we put together. And for the 70/30, it was minus 18%. So when we show clients this is the expected return, this is the historical return, annualized and total over a period of time, they can see that the 100% equities has performed better. They can see that. It's no surprise. We have 7 models, and it goes up where you get, the lowest one is lowest return, the highest equity component, highest return, and the difference is volatility. And you're sort of saying, what level of volatility can you withstand that feels right? What level of volatility do you need to take, and what level of return do you actually not just want but need to substantiate the withdrawals, your lifestyle? Now, as long as you're getting more than the withdrawal that you're taking plus inflation, your portfolio is going to be not just maintaining value, it's going to be going up in value. 7% return, you're drawing 4, it's got 3, it's pretty much that. And we find that works quite well insofar as the 70/30 model. The client doesn't need to take 100% equity exposure unless they want it.
Bear in mind, if someone's in decumulation, they wouldn't be in 100% equity. They would be typically in a 25-75.
More typically, yes.
I don't think I think my highest equity exposure, I think I've got one client who's got 2 years, so 90%, something like that. I don't have a single client in 100% equity and decumulation. I don't do it. I got one client who's very high risk appetite, and he only has a 2-year income requirement. Okay. But you started on a really interesting point, and that is
Thanks.
what return do I need to take in order to achieve my objectives? And what I try and sort of say to my client is, bear in mind that you're unlikely to spend all of your money here. So we're not only just investing for your lifetime, but we're investing for lifetime, arguably of your children, and then maybe even your grandchildren, if we can get this portfolio to build a bit of a legacy. So when you start stretching out your time horizon, your say 65-year-old client doesn't necessarily look at 20 years, but then might be looking at maybe 120 years. And that really does lend itself to having a higher equity allocation, I think.
There's data that I've put in the show notes of just some long run real returns. So obviously, real returns factoring inflation. It's just from a website. I think it's pretty accurate. It's a data that you can check out and look. But generally, for equities based since 1900, you're talking about a 5% real return, which depends on what inflation is. But if it's 3%, that lends weight to your 8% net of charges figure, and cash about 0.8% real return. And I think that if someone's got a ton of money in cash, and if you help them understand the difference between saving cash and investing equities and bonds, other assets, where the expected return is higher, and the data all shows that certainly over 100 odd years, but over 10 years, 20 years, any period like that, you're going to get a better return.
There are periods where you won't get a better return in equities, obviously.
Yeah, but over any 10-year period in history, there's never been a 10-year period where cash has outperformed equities over a 10-year period. Over short term, there is, but the longer term, regardless of what period you take, pretty confident in saying that over a 10-year period, if clients got 10 years to live, 10 years to invest, and they understand that investing means 10 years plus, you've got to have an allocation to equities to combat inflation, and inflation is the silent tax. It's one that people don't really understand. It's the truth and don't emphasize as the biggest issue enough. It's the biggest risk in investing, I think, bar none.
The biggest challenge, and I was going to come on to this, it kind of leads on from what I said before, but we kind of went on to another subject, is when you've got a single client who's got enough money to meet their income needs. So let's say they've got a defined benefit pension scheme. How much equity exposure? Do they hold it in cash?
Okay.
Does that make sense? So it's like you've got let's go to an extreme. You've got a defined benefit pension that covers all your income needs, and you've got your house paid off, and you've got a £500,000 portfolio. Do you hold it all in cash? Do you hold it in fixed income? Do you hold it in equities? What's the balance? It's just like,
Yeah, and it's again, this is the purpose of seeing an advisor, talking through the options and coming up with a conclusion that's appropriate for that particular client. You know, the ultimate financial position almost in retirement years is having a 50, 60 grand DB scheme, state pension on top. Maybe there's a few buy-to-lets getting income from that. And then you say, I've got this cash and these ISAs and investments. It could all burn, the ISAs, and it could all go. You've still got this guaranteed index-linked income. It's amazing position if that's enough to cover your outgoings. And still, you know, if the client says, well, I don't need all this money now, I don't need to spend it, or I don't want to give it all away, and I've got $500,000 in cash, there is absolutely a requirement to still have equities as part of that money. It's just not as important to have it all in equities. So you can over diversify, which we should mention. Definitely got clients with too many accounts, pensions all over the show. We try and consolidate them. You know, cash accounts. How many cash savings accounts do you need? You know, I spoke to a client today, and he's a lot of money in cash, 700,000, but there's 7 different accounts. And you're like, you know, it's a question of admin and not trusting the system and saying it doesn't make any sense to me to have 85 grand in each account because it's FSCS limit, because it's all the banks are going to go bust to zero. I'm going to lose all my money.
It's getting the interest statements as well. You know, when you've got to declare the interest on your returns, it's getting all that information.
Yeah.
And when certain accounts close or they merge and stuff, it's a right palaver.
Yeah, and so we talk about this point about how much to keep in cash. We've sort of covered that, about how much is wise to keep in cash. Interest rates, if anything, in the UK need to come down. They need to come down because the yields that the government is paying, the interest that our government is paying on gilts, on government bonds, is too high. And the only way they're going to get it down is by the Bank of England reducing interest rates. And they're only going to reduce interest rates. Yeah, go on.
I'm not sure we can say it's too high. It's too high because they can't afford it. If you're a saver, you're actually listening to that saying, no, thank you very much. I really like it where it is. I've got my $500,000.
Savings, isn't it?
Yeah, I've got my.
It's a real anomaly that we've got the situation.
I think Rachel Reeves didn't do her calculations right, and is now thinking, "Oops, a daisy." We're paying a lot of money on these income payments. We've lent all this money out in the past. So
it's like 10%. 10% of all of HMRC's revenue goes on paying interest. Similar in the States, is a bit lower. Anyway, that aside, while interest rates are where they are, the returns on cash are pretty good still relative to where they were 5 years ago, plus when interest rates were 0.5%. So it feels to a lot of people that it's a good rate of return. But I think it's important to establish that after tax, again, even if they're a basic rate taxpayer, there might be a little bit of tax in there. And if they're a non-taxpayer, they'd have to have a lot of money in there before they start paying tax. But factoring inflation, you're really only getting a 1%, a year return, if that. The biggest issue for me is, and a bit of a nightmare scenario, and I've had a couple of these, and I'm sure you have. Client comes to you, got a massive amount of money in cash, not a lot of money, not a lot of experience investing. And so then you try and say to them, you explain all these numbers, you put the number, you get them investing, ISA, a bit over time, and then you have a correction in markets quickly. And the client loses all faith that it works and goes, oh, you told you've lost all my money. So from a risk point of view as an advisor, it's much better to take on clients that have already got monies invested. It's a lot easier in some ways. It takes a lot more effort to convince someone with £1 million who's not invested to sort of invest it for the long term.
The market's positive about 3 out of every 4 years. So the odds are in your favour that the market's going to go up in that period of time. So on that note, client comes you £1 million in cash, and let's say they come to you today and you make your recommendation about how to allocate the wrappers and stuff. And they go in, they're 25 years from needing access to the money, so they're going 100% equity. Do we all go into the market in one go, or do we phase it in?
So I can only tell you what I do, because I'm sure there's lots of data to show what's best. I think if you look at a lot of the data, I think it will show that just getting it all invested and leaving it is probably the best thing. And I know that you tend to do that, don't you? The expected rate of return investing is higher. Let's just get it in. I think from a practical point of view, I would say once we've established, the emergency fund and the cash for income and capital pots and top up the premium bonds and all that sort of stuff, and we use all the allowances, ISA, pension, whatever tax wrapper you're going to put it in, I tend to phase it in over 4 to 6 payments. So 4 payments is actually 3 months because the first goes in now and then month. The difference between the first and the last is only 3 months. But so we program it to do that, and I think it's good for the for us, and it is good for the client because you're protecting the short term volatility associated with markets. You don't know if there's going to be an up or down, so you can get to a point where you phase it in over 6 months. Anything more than that, I think, is just too long, in my opinion. Don't do it over 12 months or anything. But you phase it in, the client's got it all invested, and then there's a decline. So, and you said, "Oh, you can't really win." But I generally do phase it in. I think that if I'm concerned, we've just had a big increase in markets. It might well continue for the foreseeable future. But if there's any concern in the client's mind about markets being choppy or volatile, the way to benefit from that is to phase buy. You might even leave 20% of your money's in cash and wait for a decline if you've worried about one, and then buy in. But a client who's not typically used to investing is not going to buy in when markets have dropped considerably, and you can't pick rock bottom anyway.
We would do it if a client wanted to do it. It's very rare for us to phase it in. Just like you said, the expected return's higher in equity, so we just want it in the market. But I think if a client was really that unsure or nervous, we'd probably revisit our investment presentation and explain to them how markets work, that kind of thing. We say to the client, it's going to go down. We just sort of, it's going to go down.
But that setting of expectations, hugely important. So interesting. We just talked, you and I know that the expected return on equities generally is about 8% net of costs over a long period of time. And in our projections, we generally show 6%. And we only reduce it to 5 if it's below a certain asset allocation, if it's 50-60-40 or 50-50 or below. And then if it's our lowest model, 80-20, 80% bonds, 20% equities, it's only 4%. But for almost all clients, 90% of them are in the 60-40 or above. So they're seeing projections based at 6% net cost, inflation at 3%. And by doing this, you're going to give a realistic or rather pessimistic projection, which means they're going to hit their goals. Don't just predict everything based on historical figures is my advice, because you end up then over-promising and under-delivering, and it's harder to hit the goals and make the client happy.
I think it's been quite good because we've had sort of different approaches of achieving a similar outcome. Both the decumulation, taking money out of the pots, and also how we sort of phasing in or not and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But do you think we've been clear on how much we hold in cash? Our clients sitting on too much cash. I think the answer to that is some of them, yes. But our definition of too much, have we been clear on that?
Well, I think that it's relative to the client's position and the total amount that they've got invested. If you add up all your GIA, ISA pension on offshore bonds, all your invested assets, and then you add your cash in as well, you add them all together, put them in a pie chart, the cash element should probably be somewhere between sort of 10 and 25%. Cash and bonds, you could lump them together, quite frankly. But if it's just cash that we're talking about, for me, it's 10 to 15%, I say, of invested assets. So you've got £1 million all invested, and they're about to decumulate. I'd be like, well, 150,000 of that should be cash. Sometimes it's less. The client's got a big DB scheme, and loads of other incomes and assets, and they're still working. You say, well, we don't need that much in cash. But 12 to 18 months often say that. If you sit on cash because you don't know any better, then get advice, and obviously look at investing some monies. If you're below 60 or even below 70 and you've not got any monies invested at all, then you either just don't trust markets, believe in them, and you're just thinking investing's the same as gambling. It's about...
That's another good point then as well, isn't it? Because I think what you just clarified there is you have a fixed percentage of your overall asset allocation, 10%, up to 25%, including fixed income. Whereas we don't have that. We have more needs. So 6 months expenditure, any capital for emergency fund, any capital expenditure, what they need, and then if they're in drawdown,
to a similar outcome anyway. In all honesty, it's different for everyone.
I think where it would differ is on the higher end, because a client with this client with 14 million or whatever, I think her expenditure was only a couple $100,000 a year. So
Yeah, so it's distorted. There's no question it's distorted when it gets bigger. And you don't the requirements, if you've got a good income stream and you've got enough to cover your assets, your requirements for spending, you don't necessarily need as much in cash. So it comes down to requirement for cash flow, spending, understanding what expenses are going out, what age they are, what their intentions are, and documenting all of that. And the more organized you can get a client, and sort of saying, right, you've planned this big holiday to Australia, it's going to cost 40,000. There's the money for that. It's next year. Let's ring fence that in a separate bucket. I like that. I have a different accounts. I have a holiday account, savings account, tax account, and then basic joint. It's getting super organized financially. So use an advisor to organize the client. And all they got to do is get on with their life and get on with spending it.
Yeah, no, true. Okay, cool. I think we've done that quite well. I think we've gone through, both not just our clients sit on too much cash. We've defined our definitions of that, and then what the client should do and how they should actually, get the money into the markets and why they should get in the markets.
Yeah. I think as a very generic comment, there are a lot of people perhaps that don't have an advisor out there that don't invest any money and it's all in cash. And so for them, they've got a load in cash. They might be able to, and it saddens me when I see clients with 50 grand in a current account, and I say to them, that's getting 0% interest, don't you? So most current accounts pay zero, not all, but most pay zero. Put it in a savings account. And I saw one today, and the client's got 88,000 with HSBC, and I looked at it. It's a BNS saver, HSBC Premier, great, 3.3%, not bad. But that's only on the first 50 grand. The rest of it, they've got a rule where it's only 1.25%, and you're like, come on, you're throwing away money. Put it in a decent interest-paying account that's instant access, monthly interest-paying. Chase, Revolut, Marcus, something, Forward Money, something that's going to give you circa 4%, 4.5% even.
It's interesting. We don't get into that granular detail really with our clients. If a client wants a recommendation on an account, we're very happy to give it. But what we look at is more convenience. If they've got the money with their account, stuff like that, it's like, but whether they hold it in premium bonds for their emergency fund or cash or whatever, we don't really mind. It's more of a convenience.
Yeah, it's the minutiae. I agree. It's not something we spend forever doing, but if it's about observation, you observe they've not got in a decent account and say, come on, let's just fiddle about. You're throwing away $2,000 a year in interest sometimes. Okay, should we move on to Q&A?
Hey, let's do it. What have you got?
Couple of quotes on here. My absolute favorite, I found this one. It came up in my feed almost, from Warren Buffett. And when you talk about cash and investing, everything revolves around risk. And I love it when he says, risk is not knowing what you're doing.
Yeah,
it's one of my favorite quotes.
I think that's true.
So yeah. Let's alternate then. Do you have any?
No.
Okay,
I did. You were talking about diversifying earlier, and Peter Lynch, who is the fund manager of the Fidelity Magellan Fund, which is Fidelity's most successful.
Very successful.
Very successful. Most successful fund, I believe, even more successful than the Anti-Bolton Special Sits Fund. Used to say, "Don't diversify." So people can over-diversify and diversify. I quite like that.
Yeah. Another one that's attributed to Warren Buffett. All these Warrens, goodness me.
That's a good name.
The stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. And it goes to the very heart of what investing is. It means 10 years. If there's a downturn in markets, you stay invested. You just stay patient. You hold your nerve. The other one I've got is inflation is the silent tax. I don't know who said that. It's a sort of typical investing maxim, because it's the most misunderstood topic, arguably, or one that's not explained correctly.
Inflation.
And you think your clients are getting it. Inflation, yeah. And clients, I said it to a client today, 35 inflation since COVID. COVID's nearly 6 years, 5.5 years, nearly 6 years ago, January 2020. In the UK alone, 35 to 40% increase in general cost of living. Unbelievable. Now, you've got to have a pretty big pay rise to cover the difference there. And I know it's, fuel, food costs, various other things that have just gone through the roof. And if you're not aware of it and you're not getting the pay rises, you either got to alternate your spending or get your growth of your assets to accommodate that.
I've got a couple of quotes for you. Okay, so to get rich, you need discipline once. To stay rich, you need it consistently.
Okay, good. That's definitely a Warren Shoot quote, I suspect.
It's like, no. And then compound interest turns patience today into fortunes tomorrow.
Definitely.
Okay. Is that a wrap for today?
So we'll see what Rachel Reeves does about the about people with cash ISAs and how much you can hold in cash and trying to get them to invest in the markets. Who knows? But do check out the show notes, the links. There's a couple that I'm going to include this time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Finance Geeks. That's it for today's session. We'll be back in a couple of weeks.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to the Finance Geeks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review. Drop your comments and questions on YouTube, and be sure to follow us on social media. Join us next time for more insights to boost your financial planning game.